Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Speedplay Germany in Hearts of Iron 4, number 2. We left off focusing on industry, in part because I can't figure out how to trigger the Anschluss. We need 550,000 active manpower in our military, and it said that we had that, but evidently that's not quite accurate. I also have troops all over the border with Austria, simply because we have AI decisions non-historical, and I'm not 100% sure that there isn't a decision for Austria to resist and maybe start the war early or something along those lines, so we're just getting prepared with that. I know it was a real historical concern that Italy would join in and defend Austria in its independence, although I'm not sure if there's anything like that in this game. We're also focusing on air doctrine, going for close air support. Basically, we're not really going to do anything outside of the tactical spectrum with our Air Force, besides maybe trying to defend ourselves from enemy bombers and things along those lines. So eventually we are going to be picking focuses in that sort of thing, in that sort of sphere. We don't do that quite yet, though. We also do go ahead and begin boosting fascist support and supporting a coup in Switzerland. The idea being that if we can just flip Switzerland over to our side before the war starts, then we have a new entryway into the French. We're also waiting for the Japanese, who just declared war on China, so we can go ahead and pluck out 3 of our armored divisions, and what we're going to do is go ahead and just ship those right on over to Japan, and then just start helping them take over China. The idea being, hopefully we'll be able to just defeat the Chinese before Japan actually before the war really starts, and hopefully get Japan on our side for that, and more importantly, not have them be distracted. We also get the national idea for another technology group. We are researching that right now, and just generally messing around with our production a little bit. In a few moments, we'll be able to go ahead and just deal with our troops over here in Japan, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We also have built up quite a bit of military experience, so we can edit around divisional structures right now if we so desire, and we're just getting further and further down just the various tech trees, honestly. So hopefully we'll be able to start doing this, get our forces moving forward into the various Chinese bits. One of them is just barely trained, so we're going to hopefully get them up to a decent level and hopefully get them all basically veterans before this is over. And we do go ahead and build ourselves a little bit more industry. Industry is just going to be our bread and butter forever. There we go, they did get trained a bit. So that's very good news. Alright, and meanwhile we can actually start doing the same thing against the Belgians as we are doing against the Swiss, and just go ahead and try to flip them over to fascist as well, and really just open up a wide swath for potential invasions into France. We do recall our ministers from China at the behest of the Japanese, and hopefully we'll be able to actually begin Anschlussing pretty soon. It looks as though we are not quite able to just yet. We go ahead and deploy just every single person we can. They're going to be underexperienced, but we'll just have them train. And there we go, we can finally Anschluss. So yeah, now we're on to that. We go ahead and limit the amount of production of infantry units. We're going to build a bunch of heavy tanks. And here's a thing that I didn't realize was going to be such a tremendous shift, is we shifted our light tanks all to heavy tanks, and those are actually an incredibly different thing than like Panzer IIs, Panzer IIIs, all that. We basically just shifted our entire military effort away from rapid 12-kilometer-an-hour tank groups to much slower, bulkier 5-kilometer-per-hour tank groups, and we have not produced a single tank like that. So that was a tremendous mistake. I realized it, and I just pumped that up to top production duty so we can actually hopefully get them ready before the war starts. We also inadvertently ended up just destroying the effectiveness of our support troops in China, or in Japan, because now they have no tanks. This is the moment I realized we're just going down the path to Tiger tanks and all that. We would probably make more sense to focus on other panzer groups and things like that, so we go ahead and switch these back to a different group. Now this is a completely different group entirely. All of our current tank groups are still heavy tanks and probably going to remain heavy tanks, and it would take so much training for us to get them to not be heavy tanks. And we're going to maybe try to produce some groups of light tank forces and try to get those all together and hopefully get an even larger armored group. And then I realized that we're using tons of our industry on imports, which will probably be cut off as soon as the war starts. So this was just a moment of horror as I'm realizing, with the sudden ineffectiveness of our forces in China, that I may have made potentially a just game-breaking, or not game-breaking, but just Second World War losing mistake and shift in tactical armored doctrine that will just potentially devastate us in the long term. So hopefully we managed to pull through and do better about this. The big concern is that we're going to have to focus so heavily on building more armored units that we won't be able to... Well, on the bright side, we got the anchlets then. But the big worry is that we're going to focus so much on building armored units that we're going to be forced to neglect our air force, and then we won't have air superiority, which was basically the entire plan of our... well, just entire war effort, was we were going to have just immense air superiority, and with that air superiority we would be able to make rapid gains. Well, we kind of took out the tank groups for the rapid gains, which is, needlessly to say, kind of unfortunate. We can hopefully build up a few new rapid tank groups, but we're really going to have to get more air forces, and yeah, so it's a bit of a mess right now. The best thing, though, is that since we don't have those economic imperatives, basically we're not about to go bankrupt. We can try to put the World War off as much as we can and just really do well the things that we're going to be forced to do anyway. So that is potentially what we're going to have to focus on. Right now, though, we are getting our forces slightly back up to organization. We have stopped training them simply because, well, we need all of our factories to just be producing things for us. We're also kind of getting closer to having our coups finish, and we are demanding the Sudetenland, which hopefully goes through, because if they decide to refuse our request for the Sudetenland, then we're going to be in a pretty bad spot, because we'll be able to, or be forced to go into war. Alright, luckily they went ahead and just caved in, which is great news. And now we're going to go ahead and just keep rolling on forward into breaking apart Czechoslovakia. Now, we're not going to make any decisions that bring us into war for quite some time, simply because it would be kind of terrible for us right now. You'll notice our armored units are still at like half organization. We are going to go ahead and build just even more factories. The idea being, you know, we need to upgrade our tank production as much as possible, and really just hope for the best with that. As it could go either way at the moment, and we really need it to go our way, or we're going to be in a very terrible spot. Alright, so meanwhile the Japanese are making great gains, though, which is pretty great news. We also noticed that I'm trading away tons of factories, so what we're going to do is cancel all those military factories and build synthetic oil plants. Now, the idea for that, we really need to use less of our resources on trade, especially once we do end up going to war. That will basically be the end of us, because we will have absolutely none of the resources we need. So if we can limit our dependence as quickly as possible, that would be fantastic. We are once again supporting the Japanese in some sort of limited manner. And there we go, Hungary got a little slice of Czechoslovakia, and now we're going to just focus on the complete destruction of the rest of their country. Go ahead and remove that little bit now that it's the border of Hungary. So yeah, hopefully this will all go decently well. I'm fairly sure that since we got the Sudetenland, it's just going to go through the entire, basically the entire thing, without us actually having to fight, but I still have a bit of trouble getting our troops all on the border correctly. We do also start carving even deeper into communist China, the goal basically being that, hey, we may as well take out the communists first. And yes, technologically, we are just gunning down everything. We're not going to get any other ships than submarines, because submarines are just going to be the most important for our efforts. We are pressing deeper into the Chinese territories. We would have gone straight for the communists, but we would have lost that battle, so we decided against it. Still very low supply and organization. So hopefully we will get enough of those better tanks out fairly quickly. We also make a couple new air groups. And yeah, we do not have the biggest air force in the world, which is terribly unfortunate since that was part of the goal. We really do need to ramp up production, so what we'll probably do is not focus too hard on getting light tanks and instead just get the heavy tanks that we already have up to par, and then just focus very heavily on really just air superiority. If we can get enough fighters in the air... Oh, hey, look at that. We're going to go ahead and just do the historical thing. Slovakia is a puppet. We might be able to trade it for Danzig with Poland, but now we're going to go after Yugoslavia since... Well, we may as well do that peacefully, and we're not in any position to go to war just yet, so it's good to just keep carving up various points. We also put our troops on the border of Switzerland, now that Czechoslovakia is gone, and the border with France. The idea being, I'm not sure if when we get a coup going on in Switzerland, if it will lead to a wider war as we go in to support the Swiss. We also just keep gunning forward against Red China, and hopefully that'll work out fairly well. We are once again trading tons and tons of resources over to just every other country in the world, basically. So hopefully we'll be able to calm that down a little bit. I did switch to free trade a while back because it did give factory throughput bonuses. I'm not sure if that was a great choice, to be honest. Alright, at any rate, our coup in Switzerland has led to a Swiss civil war. We go ahead and send one group of just armored units over to reinforce their rebellion. Hopefully we'll be able to do some decent work with it. And yeah, unfortunately they are out of war and we can't invite them to our faction or anything like that. We do go ahead and just try to set up orders to our forces in China so that they'll do their own thing and we can focus here on the Swiss. And alright. So we do go ahead, and unfortunately we can't apparently intervene directly. We can just use this one tank, which just kind of roved on into this valley, and is now kind of just stuck there. At least it's winning its battle. Admittedly, just mountainous passes is not really, or are not really good tank country, yet still our tanks are there, and we're just kind of hoping for the best with that. We also managed to get Slovenia away from Yugoslavia, and we're just going to keep going down the decision tree to just annex them. We also put some troops on their border in case they resist it. Although honestly at this point it's looking like if you just go down various paths, you won't actually face resistance, but that's also a bit too bold of a claim, so I'm not really going to just, base my entire strategy on the thought that they're not going to resist, because it would be unfortunate to have to race our armies across the country in the event that something does break out. Alright, so it doesn't look as though our Swiss rebellion is doing very well. We are also just researching things, as always. The Swiss army is apparently quite massive, and the rebel Swiss do not actually have very many forces whatsoever. So this is a bit unfortunate. Our Belgian revolution just broke out, so we're going to just send some forces over, just another tank group. Luckily our tank groups are getting at least a decent number of tanks at this point, so they're not terribly disorganized, although they still probably have rather low combat efficiency. And sadly our revolutionary Swiss just lost their capital, sending back our volunteer group to our own country. And leaving us, if anything, just several hundred political power points in the negative from that whole venture without really anything to show for it. Luckily over here in Wallonia, in the Belgian area, it looks as though they have at least a front line worth of forces, so they hopefully won't collapse, at least not until we can actually send real military forces in to support them. A thing I'm considering is we might just justify a war goal against that small little country, declare war on them, and then just rush on in. We also managed to go ahead and just take a bit of lands away from Yugoslavia, giving them to Bulgaria and Hungary. So hopefully those two countries appreciate it, and we're also just going to keep going down that path until it's destroyed. Back over here in Asia, we are somewhat distracted, but not so much that we can't just rush in and hopefully seize the capital of Communist China, and there we go. The People's Republic of China has capitulated, the Belgians are in a civil war, and our armored units are moderately back up to par. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow with more.